Hey there, my name's Corey and I paint characters from Descent, Legends of the Dark. Today we're going to be working on Syrus and his pet bird, Joaquin. I'm going to set up the palette with some GW paints from bright yellow to red and some AK fluorescent paints. Once we're set up and ready to go, I'm going to take some white and some of the Flash Gets yellow paint I have here and start highlighting kind of the brightest points of the Phoenix. Next, I'm going to be mixing in some of that fluorescent yellow from AK into the Flash Gets yellow and start working in a very subtle gradient. Alright, and next we can just go to straight Flash Gets yellow. I find with these fluorescent colors, it's best not to just use them on their own. They're better when they're incorporated into other paints and used as part of transition. The last yellow I'm using here is just straight Uriel yellow. So now I'm going to be taking that Troll Slayer orange and incorporating some of the brighter fluorescent orange into it as the next step in our transition. In this kind of situation, if you're having too much trouble blending, it doesn't hurt to roll a little bit of the last yellow you used and create another mid-tone before going on to a completely different color like orange. Now that the main body of the fire is done, I'm going to be going back and taking some of that fluorescent yellow from before and just using it to clean up some of the more splotchy areas that didn't quite work out when I was making my transition before. This will also have the secondary effect of kind of brightening things up a little bit and making them look a little more vibrant. Alright, then I'm going to be doing the same thing with the oranges. This is the point with basically everything that I paint where I just start jumping forward and backwards between colors and just kind of bouncing around and cleaning up things that don't quite look right to me. I think this is generally referred to as fussing. The final color I'm incorporating here is that Mephiston red. I'm first going to be glazing in some of that red mixed in with the Troll Slayer orange, and then finally the pure red just at the very tips of the flames. Normally with fire, you'd finish off with a very deep cold gray as things kind of turn into smoke, but I'm going to be stopping at just the red here just to keep things a little more cartoony, to fit in this with the style of this kind of miniature. All right, so just as a note, I'm not going to be mentioning every single color I'm going to be using going forward. Not just because I'm using a lot of different colors, but I'm kind of mixing things around and playing with them quite a bit, and it would be a little bit monotonous to spell out every exact ratio and mix that I use. But at this point, I'm just starting to base coat things, and I'm going to try something a little bit weird. Is kilt? Skirt? I'm not sure what you'd call this. Floppy pants. I'm going to be painting them yellow, and to get as much contrast as possible, I'm starting them off with a bluish kind of gray, and then slowly starting to build up to the actual yellow color at the highest points, and we'll see how that works out. Alright, I don't know if I love the extreme contrast at this point, but in for a penny, in for a pound. So I take out some blue glaze, and I start going into the deepest recesses and really reinforce that contrast. What does the Northern Border guy say? It's better than good. It's good enough. Yeah, I think that works. Now, to be fair though, I am happy with it. The only thing that I would probably do different if I redid this model is what I'm doing next here. I'm also going to be painting some of the clothes on the upper half of his body yellow, and I wanted to get that same contrast effect. So I actually mixed a little of this kind of dark wine color into some yellow. And I started painting in all of the deep areas in the clothing on his upper body. It just didn't really work out too much, way too much contrast. I would have liked a softer effect, but it's a relatively minor thing just to keep in mind for next time. So next I'm going to be taking that base yellow color and starting to highlight everything, keeping it out of the recesses. And then following that, I'm going to be taking that really bright canary yellow and highlighting all of the high points, especially areas that are kind of close to the bird because they'd be a little bit more illuminated. Once I'm happy with that, it's time to finish up the rest of the base coating. So I'm going to be using just some Wildwood contrast paint for the staff because it's sick and a totally awesome paint, although I do tend to water it down a little bit. I I just find that the effect's a lot stronger with that paint that way. Otherwise, it ends up just being too uniformly brown. I'm also using that white contrast paint on the white parts of his shirt with just the tiniest amount of Griff Charger Gray mixed into it. Otherwise, I find it just looks a little too bland. We'll be highlighting it up to pure white anyway. For the leather, I'm going to be using just a regular dark leather from scale 75, but there's two different kinds of leather on this model. So the lighter leather that kind of looks a little bit like rawhide, like on his mitt and on his sandals. I'm just mixing in a little bit of a peach color, just to add a little bit of distinction there. Also, while we're here, I'm coloring in his flesh tone, which I am just actually using a dark leather paint, mixing in a small amount of purple and flesh tone as well. Warlord purple is the color of choice that I use in almost all of my videos, and that's going to be going on his sash and on the inside of his upper cloak. Alright, I'm all out of Nuln oil, so I'm going to mix a little bit of contrast black in with some Agrax Earth shade and water that down 50-50 with water. And I'm going to be using that to coat the sandal straps and all of the leather. I'm also using just straight Griff Charger Gray out of the bottle to hit all of the cobblestones on the base. I take that contrast white and Griff Charger Gray mix from earlier that I used for the white sections, and I add progressively more and more ivory to it, and slowly start to build up the white on his shirt until we end with a nearly pure white at the highest points and on the edges of the fabric. Now for some tiny details, I'm going to be taking some contrast red and darkening it a little bit with whatever I have in my palette and using that to paint the inside of his mouth, with pure red for his tongue and just ivory for his teeth. I put way too much paint on his lower teeth here, but it's an easy enough mistake to correct. I just add a little bit more contrast back into his mouth from that original red color, and it covers up the mistake right away. Next, I'm base coating the cobblestones with some gray, adding progressively more white to build up to the edges, and base coating the vines with a light forest green while we're at it. I throw a little bit of plague bearer flesh over the vines, because they do have a little bit of detail in them that I want to bring out. Alright, now for the faces. I'm just going to take the original base color that I used for the face, and I'm going to add progressively more and more peach color to build up to the highlights. I'm going to be making the side facing the bird a little bit lighter than the other side, because it would obviously be more illuminated. I'm also going to be adding a little bit of red into some of that peach color and touching places where there might be a little bit more blood flow. With the darker skin tone, it's kind of hard to notice, but I feel like it adds to the overall effect. Something to note about the process here is that when I first start adding a little bit of that peach to that base color, I create kind of surfaces on the cheeks, the nose, the bottom lip, the eyebrows, and the forehead. Almost like they're their own separate planes that I'll be painting that are kept separate. From there, I lighten the color and I gradually highlight each of those planes individually. On to highlighting the vines on the base with a little bit of Kraken green, which is just kind of a light lime green. Normally I like leather, kind of dirty and used looking, but because this is more of a cartoony looking figure, I'm going back over it again with the original base colors to avoid tea staining, and then I'm going to be adding a little bit of a cream color to it to build up to some points of highlight. I'm going to be building those highlights up even more in places that are facing the phoenix, because I'm going to be glazing them with a little bit of fluorescent yellow. And I want that yellow to show through a little bit more, because I'm finding that these neon pigmented paints are not at all opaque, and you really need to be putting them over kind of a white base, especially if you're glazing them, for them to really show up at all. So as you can see here, I'm going to be doing that to his face, to his glove, and just any other places that I've left a little bit lighter because they're going to be near the bird. Add a little bit of red wash to the purple elements. Alright, and lastly, I'm kind of doing the Lazy Man non-metallic metal. So I'm just taking a base yellow, mixing it a bit of a brown, and then highlighting all of these little golden circles that are all over Syrus here. And I'll just be adding in progressively more yellow, building up to the points where there'd be reflections on the metal, and ending with the tiniest little glint of kind of half canary yellow, half ivory. I forgot to highlight the purple. I'm just going to sneak that in at the end, just real quick here. I'm just going to slide that in. There we go. Looking fine. Okay, we're done. All right, well, if you watched to the end, thanks. This took a really long time to get out. Wife was sick, got a puppy, then I got sick. You get it. Things happen. It's COVID. All right. I feel like such a weenie asking for this, but if you could, like, do the subscribe thing, oh my god. If you're watching to the end, you're probably already subscribed. This is probably wasted. Anyway. Okay, bye. You can leave.